for you as a sustainability manager to identify why your company wants to embrace sustainability in the first place, I think that's the foundation of everything.
Speaking of sustainability, a podcast where we talk to frontrunners, innovators, and business specialists on, well, sustainability and where they think their industries are headed, and more importantly, how they can make them more sustainable. So, hi everybody. Really nice that you could join me today. We want to speak about a really important topic, which is something that has come up a lot in conversations that I've had with sustainability managers. It's one of the key things that they consider a big part of their job, which is getting people within their company to be on board with sustainability and sustainability projects that they want to fulfill in their company. So I have with me today my two colleagues, Toby Lipsch and Zazala Quist. So thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, hi.
Nice. So today we want to talk about something which we call the sustainability bubble, which is a really important topic because it's a big bottleneck for the success of sustainability projects within companies. And we really want to get to the bottom of how you can tackle it and make your sustainability projects a success. So today we've identified some tips and tricks that you can use to really push these projects within your company. So Toby, maybe you would like to get started?
Yeah, of course. We have a nice list prepared here, and I think a good introduction for this is the first fundamental concept is very basic but very important. It's that selling sustainability is not the same as selling sustainable products, right? So what I see quite a lot is that, of course, sustainable products, there's a certain motivation why you'd buy them, right? You would buy them because you want to identify with a sustainable brand. You might want to buy them for ethical reasons. Um, but the motivation is usually a very simple one. But selling sustainability, and that's something we've of course been doing for a long time at EcoChain, because we've literally been selling the concept of sustainability to many businesses that want to embrace it, is that you have to really identify the motivation behind why a company would do that. And we use a sustainability maturity model, which is a PwC model we've adopted for this. And in our case, like most of our customers really fall into one of our three brackets. So the first bracket is just compliance. So they just comply with regulations and rules, and that's why they embrace sustainability. Um, the second biggest bracket is leadership. So that's companies that, from a leadership perspective, just want to future proof themselves, and they kind of want to, they see sustainability as a relevant trend, and they kind of jump on the bandwagon and see that it's important to embrace. And the third big chunk for us is the purpose-driven businesses, right? So companies that have it really in their DNA, and the whole point of existence is sustainability. Um, there are a couple of other motivators, which is companies that want to do it because of efficiency reasons, optimizing processes. But that's kind of a concept that's been, uh, a very old concept. And most companies nowadays that embrace sustainability, they don't really do it from an efficiency perspective, because that ship has long passed because it's, um, yeah, uh, process optimizations are not related to sustainability per se. It's also just cost efficiency, right? So I would kind of put that in brackets. But for you as a sustainability manager to identify why your company wants to embrace sustainability in the first place, I think that's the foundation of everything because you're going to have a very hard time if you communicate everything based on purpose, but you're in a construction business where nobody cares about it.
Nice. So basically, it means one size doesn't fit all in sustainability, internal sustainability communication.
Yeah, exactly. Make sure you know where you are.
Cool. And Sasla, maybe you can touch upon the second point. So, what is a sustainability bubble in general? Yeah, so kind of to tap into what Toby just said, one thing all these companies do have in common, and that is that communication is key. So, of course, based on where you are in the sustainability maturity model, it of course differs how well a company is already adapted to the idea of sustainability. But even in purpose-driven companies, sometimes you get the bubble, and this bubble means that sustainability, why it's important, what it means for the company, kind of stays in the top management level and it doesn't trickle down to the rest of the organization. And this is a sustainability bubble. So sustainability is kind of perceived as a high-end academic top management topic, and it doesn't reach the rest of the organization, which in the end all play a gigantic part in executing a sustainability strategy.
no matter in what part you are or how far you are when it comes to sustainable implementations. So this is kind of what we view as a sustainability bubble. And it's crucial to burst it because in the end, you need everybody in your company to know what's going on, especially now that sustainability is increasingly becoming actually a part of a core business, right? You want everybody to know what's going on, where your company is headed. The same counts for sustainability. Yeah, so that would sum it up, I think.
Nice. And what would be the kind of next step for a sustainability manager to help them burst in that?
Yeah. So also again, kind of emphasizing what Toby just said. Um, Sustainability means something different for every company, right? Based on what the motivations are. But in the end, we all have to implement it. So how can you make sure that sustainability or your idea of sustainability, your vision is communicated to the rest of your company? It starts with listening to your people, right? By kind of not having the idea that sustainability is too difficult to understand, even though it might still be difficult for you. Imagine how it could be for other people, right? So it's very good to be critical of your awareness efforts if they are there in the first place, and if they are there, how could you improve them, right? So the way you see sustainability might be very different than somebody who's working in a very different part of your organization. So the first step here would be to interview people. It might sound like it's a lot of work, but it isn't. So it's just basically even if you're getting a coffee, just ask people. So hey, this whole strategy thing going on, or what the CEO mentioned last week. Like, do you get it? Or like, what are points that you think I don't know could be better communicated? And you'll get a gigantic pool of information that you can use. So I think this is the first step, right? How do your employees view it? Do they understand it? Is it as important for them as you want it to be? And based on that, yeah, you take the next steps.
Yeah. Yeah, also important to do it regularly. That's something I noticed quite a lot because you wanna also measure where you're at, right? So the awareness level is something that's really important just to also track over time.
Yeah. And one way you can do that is, for example, create more touch points, right? And then what does this mean? Um, in the end, if you want your employees to stay on tune, or stay on track with what you're doing, it might be very useful to create an intranet or a channel within your company that you can devote completely to sustainability and share your updates there. What's going well? What isn't going well? Where do you want to go? What are your projects? And then it becomes easier to also track responses. So what Toby just said, right? And monitor how people understand it. In the end, if everybody receives the same information, it's very interesting to see how they all respond maybe differently.
I also really love the point of the coffee talks. So like having the informal chats in the coffee room and also having these more formal notifications or so in internet or something equivalent is really I think a good combination.
Yeah. I think you really touched upon also kind of next point, right? Which is that it's not just about creating these touch points, but to creating them everywhere, right? So not to have kind of one dedicated part, like have one poster in the coffee corner, that's kind of it, but really make sure that everywhere people can see that, they create multiple touch points, something that, of course, in marketing is very important that we want to create touch points everywhere, like wherever our potential customers are. And the same holds true for sustainability, right? You want to create touch points everywhere in the company. So it might be posters, might be in the internet, might be on social media, email, Slack. I mean, I think the most effective measure that I've seen really is companies posting on their own social media, not just like internally, but actually, yeah, using it also externally and then communicating externally, running campaigns around it, because that also really like, rallies the employees around it.
Right. And this is kind of sharing the success stories or
Yeah, it's not just success stories. I think there's, I mean, that's kind of the next point. I think a key part for that, like, okay, like now we talked about where you communicate, so you kind of want to communicate everywhere if you can, and try to use every medium. And the next question is then actually like, what do you communicate, right? So, and a common mistake that I see being made here is that a lot of sustainability turns into blah blah, and kind of blah blah from two directions. It could be either blah blah in terms of it's way too inconcrete. It's just kind of like, okay, we want to have a big sustainability journey and we have like so much like our commitment for 2025 and whatever, and but it's kind of like no, even experts, like so many times I read these. I mean, I'm not a technical expert on this topic, but I mean, so many times I see these kind of reports and website. I just like wondering, okay, what are you actually doing? There's no actionable something behind. Maybe it's there, but they don't communicate it, right? So communicate the actionable points and don't make it blah blah blah. And the same can hold true for academic, like what Zazala just touched upon, right? So if you make it too academic, too technical, that also just turns into blah blah blah, and kind of quoting Greta here, and that's just toxic to it. Like if you communicate everywhere, but all people hear is blah blah blah, they're just gonna end up asking, okay, like who's that person? Just blah blah blahs on every channel, and that's gonna actually be worse than not communicating at all. So make sure you don't blah blah blah, but show concrete actions, show concrete results, and share success stories along the way. So one movement that I like to kind of watch here is the built in public movement. So it's on like a software movement on Twitter quite a lot, and they kind of build their companies in public. And I think so share numbers and everything along the way. And I think that's something all sustainability leaders can also learn from, because just sharing what you're doing along the way and not just showing the final result. Because the final result, I mean, there's never a final result because it's a continuous process. But I mean, it might take 5 years until you're there, right? But you can't just like not communicate 5 years. So what are the little things you communicate along the way, the little benchmarks, little milestones, and take it from there.
Yeah, right. And also maybe also sharing things that didn't go so well, but you learned from and now are able to improve on.
Yeah, 100%.
Transparency, kind of what you just said, honey. I think being truthful and being transparent on your progress is crucial here. And on top of what Toby just mentioned, I think also the CEO plays a very key role in this, right? We often see that when CEOs are on board with sustainability, they're completely behind the motivations and the journey a company is going through. This often reflects back in motivated employees, right? So indeed, when communicating, and yeah, of course, you have to have like a very happy CEO, but one who is very on board. Make sure to use them, right? So help them get your employees motivated, and or even externally, internally, communicate why it's so important for the company, because this shows to the rest of the company, okay, this is taken seriously up to the highest levels. Nice, that's a very good point. So, and also, Toby already mentioned the blah, blah, blah. This is sadly something that we often see, right? And it's very, very reasonable why companies often turn to blah, blah, blah. That's because sustainability is a topic, right? That only now, well, it has been for the past few years already, but now is really, really getting a lot of attention. And it isn't easy. It's not easy. There are a lot of terms in there that are confusing, or they're confused with each other, which leads to more confusion. And in the end, imagine how this looks like to your employees, even, right? So even high up in your company, people already mix up terms, or they find certain aspects difficult. They often communicate it the same way to the rest of the organization. So tapped on everything that was just said, it's really crucial that before you start actively communicating or start actively using the intranet to communicate to the rest of your organization, you don't use any jargon, but be sure to be very simple and clear in, okay, maybe even start with a glossary, right? So in this company, we have this and this and this going on. What are key concepts that people should know about? And how can I communicate them in the simplest, most business savvy, people level possible way? Um, yeah, yeah. And I think that's very, very important to make sure that it's, yeah, as we said, right, not too academic, but understandable for, on a people level too. And that means, yeah, to clarify a lot. And I think feedback here would be the key, right? So you can think you're right and you can think people get it, but in the end, you can create this entire glossary and it might still be very difficult to understand. So, we mentioned it before and I mention it again, feedback is key. So, when you have your coffee, ask people, do you understand this concept? Right? Coffee opens doors. And make sure that to implement feedback to improve further communication. Right. It all goes back to communicating a lot with the rest of the company in informal and also more formal ways. Yeah, yeah. If you have goals and you want to communicate them externally, you need to make them understandable. It's the same way for insights, right? So yeah, I want to achieve this amount of reduction on carbon emissions. But what does that mean for everyday work? right? So what's going to happen? Is this something that will impact people's work? And it's very crucial to make sure that that's clear in the end, because yeah, your employees have to do it.
Yeah.
And Toby, would you like to take the point number 8?
Yes, absolutely. Of course, one concept that we in our marketing work relate a lot to, but it's say holds true also for sustainability managers and the communication job they have, is the stages of awareness. Because at any given time, there's not everyone's aware of what you're doing. People have different stages of awareness, right? And I think in sustainability, that is also very crucial because you have to understand that the first stage, of course, is to get people on board in general, right? Like, what are you doing? Where are you standing? What we all the things we just discussed, right? Like communicating everywhere, making sure everyone hears what you're doing. But that's often not enough because, of course, you can just blur it out to, I don't know, if you have 10,000 employees, like you could just blur it out to everyone all the time. But eventually, you also need advocates and evangelists within the different departments. And so the next stage, something that I've seen, yeah, in quite a lot of bigger companies implemented quite successfully with quite a lot of impact also is that um, step two is okay, people that are already interested. There's in every department or in most departments at least, hopefully, you'll find a lot of interested minds that already have interest in sustainability. Maybe they are themselves interested. Maybe they just are interested in the stuff you're already doing. So once you've kind of established this regular flow of communication with the entire company, the next step is really to turn the interested people within the department in advocates. And yeah, and your job is really to kind of empower them to build a peer group and like a sustainability club almost with like-minded people. And there's different ways of doing that. You could either really build like a literal group, like a working group, like having getting John from production and getting Emily from HR and just bringing them in and meeting them like once a month just to discuss what's going on so they can communicate and trickle it back to their departments so that if people talk about it, they kind of know a bit more of what's going on. They can go into more detail. That's something you can do. Or you can also just build an internal newsletter that is really good for this kind of peer group, right? So here, that's really kind of feedback on steroids because you use these people in the peer group as proxy almost for a bigger part of the organization. And I think that's a really powerful tool because you get way more insights because yeah, I mean, you could talk to so many people in a day, but they like if you talk to 5 people that each talk to 100 people, then you have way more leverage. So it's all about creating leverage here and identifying who's already interested and who can I kind of leverage as an advocate for this.
Yeah, they also maybe feel a bit more like owners of the sustainability part of the organization. So they feel like they have a voice in the things that are happening within sustainability in their company.
Yeah, exactly. So the I think the next point kind of connects with that because okay, we've talked about like where do you communicate, who do you communicate with, and what do you communicate. Um, and the biggest failure that can happen now. So once you do all these things, you already have 90% done. But the biggest failure that can happen is if there's people that are interested to work with you or help you or to communicate about, and they don't know where they can find the information, right? So obviously you want to have a glossary, like Zazala just mentioned, but there's also like sustainability is a process, right? And sharing kind of where you're at right now, that's a powerful tool that works in software development, but it works also definitely in sustainability, kind of a public roadmap, kind of like what are our current projects? What are we currently working on? What are the next steps? What have we already finished? I mean, I can even like Kanban board or just like on a blog or whatever. Um, but showing people also internally, like what are the little things you've been working on, because you're, working on so many projects at the same time but nobody ever hears about these little things, But if you have a place, like a roadmap, like a Trello board, whatever, that people can come back to and say, hey, you know what? I see that like last week or like last week they finished this project, took 3 months, looks like a small thing, but actually it has quite a big impact. And then I see these next things that end up in the pipeline. Oh wait, that actually touches on my apartment. Maybe I can get in touch to help or support or whatever. So just showing everyone like what are we currently working on, what's been finished, what's next in the pipeline. That public accountability is great. So that's something I would definitely recommend to do.
And Zasla, do you have something for the point number 10 that you'd like to share? Yes. This sounds like a lot of work, everything we just mentioned. And I mean it should be, right? Because in the end it's so important to make sure that people are on board. Because if people aren't on board, it's just going to take longer and longer. And in the end, we want companies to be efficient. We want them to make progress. And this is just one of the key aspects to do so. Now, with the importance placed in sustainability, often we see that, a lot of companies have sustainability teams already, right? This is for good reason. This is for executing the whole strategy, for measuring, for I don't know, working together with products. Um, and often what we see that's missing from these sustainability teams is a communication um, employee. What this means is kind of like a people manager when it comes to sustainability. Now, this should not be overlooked, and I think in the future we will see more and more of these people. I know that a couple of large companies in the Netherlands already have a sustainability communications team, even so with 2 to 3 people, especially in larger companies, of course, that focus exactly on everything we just told you, right? So making sure that the employee pride is boosted, that the motivation is high, that people know what's going on, that there's two-way communication, because it is a full-time job. So in the end, I think, yeah, all these points are incredibly, incredibly important. And I think that if you have a person on board that is completely focused on making sure that this communication happens, that it's improved, that it's two-way, I think that would just add so much value to a company in general, and to a sustainability team. So yeah, if there are a lot of people I think who would be very interested in this job. So I think it wouldn't be very difficult to find enthusiastic people to help you spread, your purpose and your vision internally.
Coming back to the beginning of this talk, if it's one of the key things that a sustainability manager currently has to focus on, that would take a lot of weight off of that, so they can focus on different aspects of sustainability and actually making that sustainable change. And having someone else who could actually do this kind of cheerleading within the company to make sure everybody is informed and on board as well.
Yeah, that's true. And especially since a lot of sustainability work can still be very technical. So having the technical person deal with all the communication as well, that's kind of a recipe for disaster, right? So having adding more communications oriented people to the mix can really help just to also accelerate the work for sure. Yeah.
Well, nice. That was it for our 10 tips on how to make your sustainability strategy a bigger success and to burst the so-called sustainability bubble within companies. So thanks a lot, Hassa, for joining. This was really nice, and let's do this again soon.
Definitely.
Thank you. It was so much fun.